Do you smell what Barack is cooking?
What up? What up? What up? How's it going, chat? 32 minutes to game time. It's my partner anniversary, apparently. Could have fooled me. I don't remember that shit. Okay, everyone. Waiting for mentions of tampons or women's fertility? Is that already covered?
Do you smell what Barack is cooking?
I've never heard Vance talk. Oh, he's like, he's awful. I like to describe JD Vance as, he has all the hateful rhetoric that Trump does, because of course he does. Why else would he be picked? Why else would he pick him as VP? But without any of the humor or the riz. He's the you pick him last in dodgeball kind of guy. So at least whenever Trump speaks, it's like it's kind of funny because of how stupid he is. But Vance probably is not as stupid, but still says the same shit. Minister drink if they mention Vance being an avid MTG player? Drink for couch reference. Blammo, already covered. I spilled coffee on my keyboard earlier, and now my control key is sticky. How do I unstick my keys? I suppose I have isopropyl alcohol. That'd probably get the job done. Tony drank the juice from his keyboard when he spilled on it. Yeah, my keyboard tends to, like, I have to unplug it and, like, let it dry out. It's not the first time I've spilled shit on my keyboard. Ah. Got a whole fresh bottle of Tito's for the occasion. Out of the Among Us shot glass. We're in the Dua Lipa section of the playlist, and I'm gonna let it rock. Finished watching the Tulsa mayoral debate. Not nearly as funny as what I expect here. Yeah, it's probably because it's like more grounded in reality than the national debates are. Uh, I'll pour those, and this one is for the ceremonial start of debate shot. If you're participating in the drinking game, you do one shot whenever it begins in 26 minutes. Let's see. What can we remove? I don't want to just add a bunch of rules because I don't want it to be. You probably remove fake news, honestly. It is kind of still his catchphrase. He doesn't really say it all that much. We're gonna remove this. And we're gonna put. He gets checked out the Haitian immigrant stuff. I don't know if they're even gonna bring it up again. Sure, like I feel like it's so unpopular that they're not gonna bring it up again. We'll see. Did he admit it was a lie on X? I don't know if he did it on X. He did it on uh like news shows. He's like, "Hey, listen, if we have to I forget the exact verbiage, but he basically said, "Hey, listen, if we have to exaggerate to get people to talk about these important issues, and that's what we're going to do." Let's see. Blames a blames immigration on unrelated issue. There we go. That's that one. That one's gonna get some play. Blames unrelated issue on immigration. Yeah, right. Whoops. Hee. Capital I immigration. Oh my god. Or
Drawer
biddies.
Skull cheered. X100. You think I should put off my workout till TMRW so I can join in the drinking?
You got 23 minutes. Just do the important lifts. Is we had the best economy and Bayern ruined it. I literally just... well, we have boldface lie, so, I mean, that's kind of... Boldface lie covers a lot. Stolen Valor mention? We could probably remove handled COVID well, honestly. Alan probably isn't going to see play in current news cycle. Misogyny. One drink for, we'll just say a drink for misogyny. Or we could just, we'll just say bigotry. I've been watching NFL games lately. Go Birds. And there's been a awesome Trump ad where they're like really doubling, tripling down on the Kamala Harris is giving transgender operations to illegal immigrant prisoners. And they're taking an out of context interview that she did, as you do, where she's basically being like, yeah, we should give healthcare to everybody, including transgender inmates. But they're running ads with it, and the punchline at the end is what gets me every time. And the tagline for the ad is Donald Trump, or it's Kamala Harris is for they them. Donald Trump is for you. I think mentions couch fucking should be added to finish drink. Well, yeah, the Kamala is for they them line. It's really us versus them, guys. There's no two ways about it. Ah, is this not a fucking... I have this little guy. I don't know if this is a twist top or not. And I do not have... I do not have anything within arm's reach to... I don't think this is a twist top, guys. Oh, is it? Forget it. This is not a twist top. Fuck! Use your teeth. No thanks! I'm gonna stand up and go get the bottle opener out of the other room. Your trees are not twist tops? Yeah. Yeah! Okay. I've removed the cap. Ideal universe, guys. Vance bombs hard tonight, gets replaced. Imagine. That would be peak.
Grotesque postmodern psyop, and anyone who's fallen for
Re-Evolution, thanks for the 75 months. Goddamn. Also, Aaron, 13 minutes ago, thank you for the resub. Put the music on screen. And I'm gonna switch once the actual thingy starts. I'm gonna switch it, but I can, yeah. I go here. I capture this. I control C. Go back. Wait, is it just this? Oh, yeah, there it is. Hee hee, I already had it. Kind of a little janky. Eh. Eh. Removing Vance and adding RFK. That'd be really funny. Too much of a weird debate bro type for that to happen? I mean, it could. He could get rizzed up and down by Tim Walz. I definitely should have held off before I definitely should have held off before I put the ice in my glass, because it's like already halfway melted. The drink of choice for today is Moscow Mule, the most American beverage. Equivalent to the juice of 8 limes, it claims. Is that a bear in the back? That's Snoopy from Charlie Brown. I'm writing in Joe Biden. Honestly, me too. Yeah, these this works. You know, just replace the names with the current guys. Your Kaguya poster is framed perfectly to remove all context. Yeah. Okay. It's straight to ads. I was gonna be like, okay, let's switch to the thingy, but
because John McCain
they're running ads. I will too. Ha 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 ha. Fuck. What the? Yeah, I looked at that. Was that Discord that I just saw in that advertisement? I heard they made MGS political. Head on. Yeah, they went and made it political. Clearly. Thoughts on the Eagles this season? Very concerning so far. Very concerning stuff. It's we're kind of in the it's so over territory. Last game was LOL. Yeah, but like half the like a bunch of the guys were hurt. Let's not jump to conclusions, you know. This is a hilarious poll, in my opinion.
Say the economy is still in bad shape. Senior business
because
Jolene Kent has been digging into both.
I mean, if you look at the stock market, it says otherwise.
High prices of housing, childcare, and basic costs. Jolene, good evening. So, what do you expect to hear tonight from Senator Vance and Governor Walz on their plans to tackle these high prices?
Cecilia, great to see you. Get ready to hear a lot about the economy and the cost of living. You can expect Senator Vance to continue to hammer Harris and Walz.
Stocks are about as real as V-Bucks.
So
true, honestly.
Using government data shows that grocery prices are up 21% since Biden and Harris took office, even though they have leveled out lately and wage growth has been keeping pace with inflation. You can expect Vance to hit on Trump's proposed 20% tariff on imported goods.
That'll fix it.
Economists estimate that the Trump tariff proposals would cost the typical middle-income household at least $1,700 more a year.
Hold up on that.
And Walz will likely play up Harris's federal ban on price gouging, though keep in mind, neither campaign has really offered much specifics on how they're actually going to implement and carry out these proposed policies. Cecilia.
Yeah, still waiting for a lot of details
I have the size
on
right.
that one. As we are talking right now, shipping has been brought to a halt along so much of the East Coast and in the Gulf of Mexico as a result, of course, of this port strike that we've been following. How much do you expect that to impact prices in the coming weeks and days?
Volume check. Volume
25,000 union
volume
dock
check
workers
chat.
at 14 ports from Houston to
How's
Boston.
the volume sound compared to my voice?
Job last night at midnight, right? And according to JP Morgan Chase, the strike could cost the economy up to $5 billion a day. And economists worry that a longer strike would disrupt the supply chain on everything from your perishable foods to cars and construction materials. But we also know that things like fuels for home heating oil, for example, diesel gas, those are actually transported in ways that are not expected to be impacted by the strike. And according to the New York governor, Kathy Hochul, there's no need to be, running and panicking and going to the grocery
hurricane
store
relief
and
mentioned.
Goods, as you
I mean,
might
that
have
will of course be talked about.
Sure, still these concerns coming just 5 weeks out.
Ooh, yeah, there was one that I know for certain is
how much families are struggling to cover the cost of
happen.
childcare. This has been a big one in terms of talking points.
We're
Senator
going to
Vance made some headlines recently over the suggestion that grandparents should be more involved.
Why are we giving aid to
a lot of
Ukraine,
this is
but
the care economy,
not
right? It's been a central talking point for both
Carolina.
Vance and Walz. But here's the brutal reality. The cost of childcare is rising faster than inflation. It's almost
guaranteed
double the rate
100%.
of inflation. Both of these
bet the farm right now that JD Vance will say this.
Federal paid family leave would be an important priority here if they win. But again, few specifics on how long it should be. And we do know that Vance told our colleague Margaret Brennan back in August that he supports an expanded child tax credit, expanded child care options for families.
My favorite bit about that Republican angle currently is
saying aunts and uncles should be helping out
that
more
we're
too.
saying that, like, why aren't we giving aid to North Carolina?
Really, struck by this next one on housing.
We are.
A CBS News
They're not being ignored, guys.
They are not confident that they will ever reach the American dream of being able to own a home. What are the campaigns promising to change that?
Cecilia, look, you've got the Fed cutting interest rates last month, right? And you've got more Americans who want to get back into the housing market. So it's kind of encouraging to see. But Vice President Harris has now proposed a $25,000
mass deportation to ease demand. There's too many immigrants here, not enough houses. That's the problem.
Builders of starter homes, which are in short supply, to help tackle
the immigrants with their vast amounts of wealth are coming in and purchasing the houses.
So this depends, again, on congressional approval. It depends on the type of implementation. And former President Trump has proposed changing regulations, making federal land available for
famously
housing.
rich
He hasn't offered many details
Mexican
on that
and South
front.
American
He
immigrants.
He wants to deport 15 to 20 million undocumented workers who he is blaming for increasing housing demand, something that Senator Vance says he supports. But mass deportation could also impact the workforce needed to build homes here as well, Cecilia.
Yeah, and so many questions on how they and if they will actually be able to pull off that plan, Jolene.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Well, we don't need to build new homes. We just have to kick the brown people out of the current ones. And that solves our problems.
Compared to how that has wrecked economies all over the world, the U.S. economy has bounced back. The recession never came. Inflation is coming down. The jobs numbers are good. Can the Harris campaign say any of that without looking at
stock markets? They've been posting record highs for like what the past like month and a half. It's like day after day after day, record high, record high, record high, record high.
Thread the needle between look how much I did to bring
stocks are way up
back from the breach. Look at
typically doesn't happen when the economy shit.
Look how prices or inflation at least has come down. Look at this legislation that I passed. And yes, we need to do more, but I'm working on it and I've got a record. Harris has really leaned into the notion that more needs to be done.
Did my message, is it not pinned?
She talks a lot about that. You heard Joe Ling
just describing the assistance she wants to
message
in chat?
First-time home buyers, the child tax credit,
drinking
lots
games?
of different
I definitely
tax
pinned it
credits.
earlier.
And so
where the fuck did it go?
There is some indication that approach, along with
I told it to stay there until it was manually unpinned,
along with gas prices coming down, is starting to move the needle.
Or until the end of the stream.
Our polling shows that while Trump does still have an advantage on that big issue of the economy, that she's starting to inch closer and closer.
All right, Nancy, thank you. Guys, we are just minutes away from the vice presidential debate. You are watching CBS News. Stay with us.
It'll stay there this time whenever I pin it. Pin. Yes. Manually unpinned or end of stream. Click. Great. And it'll be there. Because I clicked the option that told it to stay there.
Progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
Gamble, 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 gamble. Bet on sports, gamble, gamble.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
It is.
Sports betting as the way
if you watch sports on TV in current year, it is insane how many fucking sports gambling ads there are. It's integrated into the pregame, like. If you watch the halftime show, your favorite sports talking head will give you like, here's my picks for this game. Gamble on these picks.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends.
With like DraftKings ads and FanDuel ads, MGM ads. Like ESPN has like their own fucking sports book now. There's so many gambling ads. It's so crazy.
Real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
You know, I thought that I was all for. I was like, we should legalize betting. Who cares? It's people gamble on the games anyways. But now I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ! It's like 50% of the fucking ads that you get on when you watch NFL games. It's 90% of the gun. I guess it's proportional to how much money is getting brought in. It's so crazy.
And eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry.
There's so many.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are
you add one shot? No.
Things must change.
I don't want to bogging down the drinking game rule list with a bunch of things that will get mentioned maybe one time. Defeats the purpose. There's already a ton of rules, and most of them are generalized.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up
However,
other voices.
here's the all-encompassing rule. You can drink however much you want to. It's up to you.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
What if Vance calls Tim Walz gay? If he does that, I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Is ensconced with all of our colleagues in the press corps over there in the room down the aisle from the actual debate location. Ed, we've seen
because of how cool and badass he is.
We're sure getting it today.
Yeah, John, you remember back in 2016 when you hosted the Republican presidential primary debate? And that morning, Antonin Scalia died, and suddenly you had to rip up all the questions and focus on the future of the Supreme Court, which probably hadn't been a top-of-mind concern. well, look at what's happened in the last few days. It's only October 1, but in essence, we've had some surprises. The intensification of the situation in the Middle East.
The situation, we're calling it.
Ravaging the Southeast that are now going to cause some debate over spending and climate change. All of
You know the situation going on over there.
President faces all sorts of unexpected challenges that suddenly can prop up. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see
The Anniversary Game Awards and had Jeff Keighley as a finish drink. No.
All right, Ed, you don't get to go anywhere. We're going to be
I'm not gonna put these things on there that aren't going to happen.
Officially minutes away from the start of this debate. I want to get your final thoughts, Major. I want to start with you because we've been saying so much is on the line tonight. How much of tonight is about the audience of one for J.D. Vance?
A considerable amount. President Trump has expectations for J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance knows, as Robert Costa so thoroughly laid out, at age 40, his entire political career is ahead of him.
I'm not putting the
ticket does not prevail.
We'll play the music, but I'm not going to put it on screen.
Uncomfortable and unwelcome and unwanted post-Trump era. What role does J.D. Vance play in that? A considerable amount of that decision will be drawn.
I always like it when people come in and they say, is that fucking Mozart playing?
In contrast, Governor Walz is 60, 1 year older than Kamala Harris. He does not have any obvious designs on the presidency if Kamala Harris wins and serves out 2 terms. He's there to enhance the ticket as it exists.
My thingy isn't
and
quite the right
amplify
size.
Things on the positive side where and when he can. Very different calculations, very different risk factors for the two.
I can't,
Bob, even if you're
can't drag it
Bob
down
Dole
any
had a bad
further.
night in
I guess I make it
1976,
bigger
he was the
here.
nominee 20 years later for the Republican Party, so you can even rescue yourself from a bad night. What are your final thoughts on tonight?
Everybody in the press, when we're in the press galleries on the campaign planes, they talk about these vice presidential debates as low impact, but they really are high stakes. Everybody watching tonight knows one of these 2 men could become president of the United States. The country is going to take a temperature on character, on policy. Who are these people who might lead the country? And one of them might be leading the country should a crisis happen, a heartbeat away from the presidency. We live in a time of assassination attempts on the Republican nominee.
That's
of
better.
Political violence.
We live in a time
of question that one day one of these people could be president.
There's nothing we can do about it.
People live healthy lives and serve full terms, but you never know in American history. That's
You know,
history always
back in
tells.
the day, there didn't used to be assassination attempts on the president.
Incredible floods in North Carolina, which also is a platform for presidents.
It is, because the handling of natural disasters is often a proxy for voters of competence. They look at how you handle something like that, and they say this person is capable of handling big,
Gotta
important
wipe my
things.
glass down.
And that's
There's so
why
much
President
condensation
Biden
on it. I
tomorrow is
haven't
heading
even
to North
touched it.
Carolina and South Carolina, and Florida and Georgia the next day.
And here we see the vice presidential candidates there. Tim Walz standing a lone man behind his
He's already there?
Ed, give us your last thoughts as we watch here as
Bro's been
Vance is
pre-gaming?
off in the wings for the moment. Oh, there he is.
It's performance. That seems obvious, but no faux pas. And they're looking for a viral moment. That's what they'll be
Flip
looking
farm.
No handshake.
No handshake, and there you have Governor Walz.
Okay,
taking some
time to take a shot.
Notes. J.D. Vance doing the same as our colleagues.
And then you're shaking hands
Oh.
before the cameras came.
That's right. Well, we have the vice presidential debate coming up in a moment.
doggy.
It will be moderated by our own Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz take the stage. Well, they've taken the stage, so stick with us here.
Jimmy Carter
And join
only
us
served for
also
one
on
term.
our
I have an
streaming
idea.
channel, CBS
He's
News
not too old yet.
24/7 for exclusive content you won't see anywhere else. Thank you.
It's exclusive right here. A little ginger beer chaser. It was a head off. True. I was busy consuming alcohol. Sorry. Oh God, we're stacking the music.
Just over a month to go until Election Day, the first and only meeting between the 2 men who hope to become Vice President of the United States. Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're to turn this whole country.
I grab this. I'm gonna grab a copy here.
You know, it's at the end
Bring it
of
to the other
this
monitor.
journey, Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
They've never met.
I'm Margaret Brennan.
Awkward.
In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate,
It's all that technical
these
issues.
are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News
I'm not
reserves
gonna.
the right to mute the candidates' microphones.
We're not gonna
to
fact check
maintain
them. We're just gonna
decorum.
give the
We
other
have
guy
not shared the
opportunity
questions or
to.
topics with the campaigns. The stage
Bro.
is set.
They can just get up there and lie all they want to,
for
because
joining us.
people get mad
Let's
if
get
we
started.
call them out for
Tonight, our country is
lying.
facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region.
I think we need
over
to
the
invade
past
Iran
year to try
is
to
the-
prevent a regional war.
Is
Iran is weakened.
the solution here.
But the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran?
It's by Israel. It's not by us. It's by Israel. It's not by us.
Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Gotta
get them before they get
Israel's
us. That's all I'm
ability
saying.
To be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies
drink for
is
Israel,
an
by the way.
absolute
Get
fundamental
your glasses ready.
necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today.
One sip for
where,
Israel.
along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question.
I like the comment, holy yap.
Oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran?
I got bad news if you never watched a debate
Margaret,
before.
I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help.
Isn't he a venture capitalist?
She raised me in part because my
prior to becoming a senator? We're talking about being working class.
Life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude.
That's not a working class job at all.
For the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better.
What about invading Iran, though?
If we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American
dream is going to be attainable. Can we get some boots on the ground or what?
Once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen
there was
assets
no war
thanks to the
in
Kamala Harris administration.
There was
What
no
do they use
war
that
in
money
Gaza
for? They
during
use it to
Trump's
buy weapons
administration.
that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back.
World police, baby.
Now,
yes.
You asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe.
Not us.
And we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Well, it's their decision. It's their decision.
Walz, do you care to respond
can't
to
do
any
anything.
of the allegations?
No influence.
Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
And that would be really bad if they had them.
Aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance,
I think we should go in and destabilize,
so
that way they can't build any nukes.
Pause parts of its nuclear program.
Those weapons would cause mass
that
destruction.
Deal.
If you think about it.
He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S.
and we want to avoid
now
that.
Make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets.
She let it happen.
Smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself
concept of peace through strength.
When was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
True, so true.
Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change?
Talk about Ukraine.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Talk about Ukraine.
So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually
per unit of economic
output
output
and cleaner water, the best
is
thing
the metric
to do
that we
is
need
to
to
double down
use.
and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well,
if you think about it, the coal's worth it because of how cost efficient it is.
It is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together to all of the governors and the emergency responders on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real.
That was what the Inflation Reduction Act
mostly
you can do that
for. At the same time, you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially
we need to become isolationists.
Go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite.
Oh, more nuclear plants.
And also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy
that has been the Republican
exactly
angle for decades.
Creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're
Fake
going to turn
news.
now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign
I think it's a top issue because
the largest mass deportation
politicians
plan in American
talk about
history,
it so much.
and to
They
use
force
the U.S.
it.
military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So
we need to
first of all,
revoke
Margaret,
the
before we talk
Dreamer
about
Act.
Deportations, we have to stop.
Split 'em
bleeding.
up.
We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations, and that gets me to your point.
It's time for
Margaret,
sure.
about what do we actually do?
The big wall. It takes
So
more
we've
than
got
4 years to
20,
build.
25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation.
This will literally drive
Right
up costs,
now,
by
in
the
this
way.
country, Margaret, we have 320,000
Exploiting
children
immigrant labor
that
is
the
a
Department of Homeland
fantastic way of
Security has
making things
effectively
cheap.
Lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them, hopefully, are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is, unfortunately, Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember, when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal
my
said,
senator.
pass this. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years
This
after
time
he
for
came
sure.
down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris
And we're gonna
of
do nothing to
inviting
stop
drug
it.
mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country.
I don't know how true
and we
this claim
know that
is,
they
by the
use
way.
children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging
Them Walz
that
smells.
she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fixed this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not
The
true.
Democrats
Don't do
bring it up because
There's
it's just such an
consequences to this. There's
indefensible
consequences.
argument.
We could come together. Senator Lankford
Pretty smart.
did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald
How the
Trump
turns
continue
table.
to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
True.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this? Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents
this
they
term.
just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz
Most of them
brought up
come
the
here
community of
legally.
Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to
Blames
compete
unrelated
with
issue on
Americans
immigration.
for
Drink.
scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything.
True.
On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want
I love the
order to
Bible.
it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat
I drink
other
for Among
people.
Us.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well,
Nora?
Margaret, but
Thank you. Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
Thank
I
you,
think it's
Nora.
important
We're
because
going to turn out of the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
Oh,
the rules.
I have to get a word in. I
And
have
since you're
to.
fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in applying for a green
Bro,
card
you
and
just
waiting
have
for
to
10
download.
years.
You have to
That is
download
a
the app. You have to
certification of
download
illegal
the
immigration,
Make Me a
Margaret,
Legal Immigrant
Thank
app.
you, Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much.
the books since
Take a
1990.
drink for
Thank you, gentlemen.
moderator must
We
forcibly
want
stop
to
him from
have-
talking.
Has not been on the books.
Oh my God, JD, shut the fuck up. We muted his mic.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
Let's
We have
go.
So much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora?
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is
That's
a
one
top
drink
concern
for Mike is
voters.
muted as they're
Each
still
of your
speaking.
campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2
I'm halfway through my marg.
trillion. How would
Dude,
you pay
I'm-
for that without ballooning
Pick
the
this shit
deficit?
up.
Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And
I have
Kamala
a
Harris
small
and I do
amount
believe
remaining in
middle
my
class because that's
alcoholic
where we come
beverage.
from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12%
What if it's
more
just,
houses in
like a
Minneapolis,
little
prices went down on
700%
rent
profit
4%. It's
margin?
working.
You know?
And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that,
one of these days,
more people are participating.
One of these days, we're going to do it.
Have the things that they need.
Here it comes.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond.
I'm charging up my big wind-up punch, and I'm going to throw it this time.
And says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these election policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life.
It's the Democrats' fault that houses are so expensive.
If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies
they don't teach you common sense at these liberal universities.
In a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans.
I think we just need to eliminate taxes.
2017, and
if tax cuts are so great, what if we cut them to zero?
We've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump...
The reason why the American dream is dead is because you're getting taxed too much.
What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, what
if we did negative taxes? What if the government gave you money?
Can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years? And the last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Coughs. Moderator coughs.
Trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that.
Well,
they
no.
If we shipped our industrial base off to
that part is true.
And elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that.
The Chinese laborers don't get paid as much as the American ones do.
Productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off.
I can't believe things are more expensive because we are exploiting Chinese laborers.
Had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore.
It's cheaper
We're
for the
bringing
corporation.
American
It's cheaper for the
manufacturing
consumer
back. We're
too. I promise
unleashing
you that.
American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff, and this isn't just an economic issue.
The labor doesn't
We've
cost
got
as much
three
because
beautiful little kids at home,
they
7,
don't get
4,
they
and
don't
2.
get
I
paid.
love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now.
They don't get paid as much.
So many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to
I'm drinking
stop.
for
And
implicit
we're not
racism.
gonna stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator,
common
Walz,
sense
can you address that?
wisdom.
I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas.
We're
but I
union
understand
guys.
that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history
here's
with
a guy.
China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies
CBS
that were
News
overseas.
confirmed fact
We're in
checks.
agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald
We won't
Trump
do
is
it on the
talking
air,
about
but
it.
you can go to
Kamala
our
Harris has a
website.
record 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So
Please.
appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a
show
gross
that he
generalization.
did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens.
The economy's doing great.
I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable.
Biden doesn't exist, by the way. Yeah. The target has shifted.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to
Let's
get
nationalize
to
it this time.
Gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about
Maybe,
personal
please.
qualifications.
Can we please?
The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989.
Damn.
But Minnesota Public Radio and other media
Was it-
outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy? Your 2 minutes.
Well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look,
Did he
I grew
lie
up in
about being at
small
Tiananmen
rural
Square?
Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17.
A weird thing to
worked
lie
on the
about.
farm, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact the difference it made.
Is this a Hillary Clinton sniper fire moment? You guys remember that?
I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself.
Remember when Hillary Clinton bragged multiple times that she landed at whatever war zone place under sniper fire on the tarmac?
Those are the things that I think.
And she said it time in and time out and time in, and it just wasn't true. It was not being shot at by snipers.
The question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this, so I will just. That's what I've said.
There you go.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit.
I prefer this than to just completely dodge it.
I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret
getting caught in a lie and then being
and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, "Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism." You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants
Donald
to
Trump
hear?
needs to hear some advice.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record.
Not very much
but most
left in the
importantly,
bottle.
Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly,
super great economy under Donald Trump. Made lots of jobs.
When you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if
I love
Congress
the moderator
was
who
doing
keeps
its
fucking
job.
coughing into the mic.
I strongly believe, and I've been
why
a
are their
United
mics
States
hot?
senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern.
If only they
sat
there and
on
discussed.
tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern.
They were
I want to talk about this
obsessed.
tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just
Imagine
accused this of
my
being
face
a
when you commit
national
impeachable
sales tax.
offenses.
Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing.
Tariffs are good.
And it's the one
We should have a
issue, the most
4,000%
pro-worker part of the
tariff
Biden administration.
on
It's the one issue
video
where
game
Kamala Harris
consoles
has
entering
run
the
away
United
from
States.
Joe Biden's record. Think
You
about
have to
this.
buy
If
the
you're trying to
Xbox.
employ
I'm sorry.
Slave laborers
None
in
of that
China at
Japanese
$3
shit.
a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion.
Tariffs on
Former President Trump
abortions.
said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion.
Moderator
He
coughs.
brags about
I'm going to
how
drink when the
great it
moderator
was
coughs.
that he put the judges in
Impromptu
and
rule.
overturned Roe versus Wade. 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing.
One of the
Amanda
moderators
Zaworski would
is
disagree
tick.
with you.
They
on
be
it's
coughing a
beautiful
lot.
thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor.
I think
And
it
that would have been
depends
an
on the
abortion in
context,
Texas.
perhaps.
That would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duval, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather.
Yikes.
Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley,
oh, wait, there's more.
You soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments.
We should make condoms illegal. You have to have children.
Infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business.
A
but those things are
pregistry.
being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket.
That's what the Civil War was fought over.
In many other countries in the world.
I've
This
never
is about healthcare. In Minnesota,
the
we
pitch.
are ranked
It's a
first in
states'
healthcare
rights
for a
thing.
reason.
Like,
We
yeah,
trust women,
that's what the
we
Civil
trust
War was
doctors.
about too.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't.
Sounds kind of badass.
This issue, 'cause I know
I want to work
Americans
for
care about it, and I know
the
a lot of
pregnancy
Americans don't
FBI.
agree, with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And
The
you know, I
inspectors.
grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And you know, one of them is actually very dear to me, and I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to
He
support
brags about
fertility
overturning
treatments.
Roe v.
I want us to
Wade.
make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's
I mean,
so much that we can
Republicans
do
conceding
on
on
the public policy
abortion,
front just to give
cool.
women more options.
But that's not what you've
Right? So,
done.
of course, Donald Trump has
Don't
been very
act like
clear
you've been
that on
the
abortion
fucking
policy specifically, that we
pro-women
have a big
Republicans, because
country
you
and it's
haven't.
diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions.
Guys,
Let
it's
the
so
individual
messy.
states make
You
their
know, and
abortion
sometimes
policy.
it's just
And I
it
think
gets
that's what
crazy
makes
out
the
there.
most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me
We're
talk
going to
about
codify it for sure.
you hear us talking exactly the same.
The Congress
Donald
functions, and
Trump
we'll pass
is
it.
trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion
filibuster
regime
will be
anywhere in the
overridden.
entire world.
Congress is going to have to vote on the bills this time.
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job.
I learned that
I'm
I'm unpopular.
So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood.
Here we are, the unpopular party.
And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
No.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice.
We're pro-family.
Not be that.
It turns out this abortion policy is unpopular. We're gonna address every issue except the abortion part of it.
Be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric.
If you accidentally don't kill the baby, you're not required to not kill the baby. You have to murder the baby, the real alive baby.
Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor,
we need to be pro-baby.
This is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News Vice Presidential debate in just a moment.
Slamming the rest of this. I'm gonna go grab more from the other room. It's a real zinger. Here be.
On our places.
Bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses and difficulty breathing and bronchitis?
Standing up and sitting down.
Hard question to answer.
We're talking about
my legs are sore.
Blatant releases
I did leg day.
of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
Toxic fog. Oh, is this the train explosion place?
Like a screenplay, something
that train blew up and
it's not fiction.
It derailed and like everything got fucked up.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
One shot.
John Grisham novel.
2 shot.
True crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The train derailed because of woke DEI. It's pretty true.
You're old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
And some lime juice.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risk
I gotta say,
the territory.
going on a space trip sounds cool and all. I think once you get there, you'd be kind of bored on it. That's my takeaway.
Airplanes falling out of the sky would have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I don't think it would actually be all that fun. I think it'd be kind of boring.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia.
It looks cool. I don't know. Put me in a room and then like we could like make an anti-gravity room and like a high definition screen.
She's the first black woman on the Supreme Court.
And it would be way cheaper.
And she's determined she won't be the last.
My parents had raised me to believe that I could do anything I wanted to do.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson on Person to Person.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
I can see clearly now that the rain is gone.
That's right. Look at his outfit. Give me some love.
I feel like this ad break is longer than typical for these debates.
All right.
All you have to do is complain about it, and then it stops.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn
Vance in
now
jail,
to
check
America's
Claire.
gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is
Doesn't
by
exist.
firearms.
Nope.
Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats
More
claim would
guns.
curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s.
Jimmy Carter
So let me
died?
ask you,
For real?
earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter
Minutes
were
after he turned
convicted
100?
of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case,
If we just blame parents, they'll raise their kids better.
Local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as
me
a father
handing a
of
gun to
3
my
beautiful
potentially
little kids,
dangerous
and our
child
oldest is now in 2nd grade
on purpose.
And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase
it's the immigrants'
security
fault
in our schools. We have to make the doors locked.
So was this like were there too many immigrants in like the fucking 1990s?
We've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer, and I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and
I say this with a
he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old was dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough.
There's nothing that can be done.
That worked. I've spent time in
But also it doesn't just happen at the schools.
They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scare
Trump. They've tried to kill Trump 2 times with him in the past 3 months.
Do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that. And I hope
oh, that sucks. That sucks, Senator. Governor, that's so bad.
What
shucks.
Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think
America's just more mentally ill than other nations. That's why we have much more gun violence.
Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affects
it's not the gun ownership thing, it's the mental illness.
But it's the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today.
Ball.
And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this.
I think the problem with the gun violence is the guns.
I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States.
It's the fucking Mexicans.
To the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. First, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned.
What if the rich people had less money so that way they could afford to purchase fewer properties with which to rent out?
After midnight mass, where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan,
the GI Bill was the end-all, be-all of problems. It solved everything.
Now look, you're going to pay.
We just need another world war, and we need to put more boots on the ground.
The appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from
and
it. And
then everything will be awesome again.
Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up.
I will
Senator
draft Dodge
Vance,
like a real patriot.
If
I got drafted, I would also draft Dodge. I would sooner go to jail than to go to war.
Remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country.
The home prices are so high, and the illegal immigrants who are working
right alongside massive
below minimum wage jobs can afford them.
under
Real
Kamala
and
Harris's
true.
leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing
Her
more
opponent
affordable,
is the
I invite
former
her to
real
use the office
president.
that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable.
You're not allowed to take
Now, you
this
asked,
angle,
Margaret, what would
JD.
immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver's
Earlier
paying
in the same
40%
debate,
more for
we
diesel,
were talking
then
about
the lumber he's delivering to the job site
how
to
we
build a
don't
house
produce
is
enough
also
energy
gonna
because it's
become a
all
lot more
because we're
expensive.
importing
If we
everything.
open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But
We're wasting
Senator,
time.
Where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that
Let's
we should be opening
tear
up
down the
building in this
parks
country.
and
we
build
have a lot of land that could be used.
luxury
we have a lot of
housing.
Americans that need
Thoughts?
homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building
House
more
expensive
homes
because
for the
everything
American citizens
expensive.
who deserve
Untrue.
to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want
House
to let you
especially
respond
expensive.
to the allegation that the vice president is letting
Comparatively
in
to other
migrants,
things.
True, and again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's again blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask
Welcome
you on
to
this question,
fuck off,
are
Nevada.
we going to drill and
No.
build houses in the same federal
What
land?
if we
And I
kick
think when
the
people get
natives
federal
off the
lands, these are
reservations
really
and use that
important
for
pieces of
housing?
land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about
And we
this as
send
someone
them
who
to
cares deeply
Mexico.
about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these
deport
things.
them
We've
to
got about 20% of
Mexico.
the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There
is no
many
study
contributing
because they
factors
made it the fuck
to
up.
high housing
That's a
costs.
source.
What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly
It's time to
have a
explore.
federal administration that makes it harder
Imagine
to
calling
develop
yourself an
our
explorer
resources,
in the
makes it harder
21st
to
century.
build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president,
That regulation, it costs too much.
Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, At the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover
This was an
Americans
issue
with
in the
pre-existing
2008
conditions. In fact,
debate.
a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said,
what if we nationalize
allow
it?
States to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill, but the non-chronically ill. It's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was
How do you
president
ethically
of the United
price
States.
something
And I
that
think he
is
makes a really good argument that it salvaged
life-saving,
Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important
How
point
can
about
somebody say
President
no?
Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done, but when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is
16 whole years ago.
Major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill.
Woo!
Now, fast forward.
Rest
what
in
that means
piss.
to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you
What
have
if
not yet explained
what if
how
the
you would
government
protect
just paid
people
for it
with pre-existing conditions
with tax
or laid
money
out that plan?
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect
instead
people
of
with pre-existing conditions.
paying money
We
to a
wanna keep
company who
those
then gives
regulations in
money
place,
back
but
to
we
you
also
if you
want to
need
make the
it.
health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved
The economy was
very
doing great.
program from a Democratic administration that
Unemployment
was
was
collapsing
super
and would have
low.
collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look.
Oh, you're
people
telling me that I
know
have to be
that they need to
insured?
be on
God damn
healthcare.
it, this is
People
communism.
expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy
My ass
into
is
Medicare.
not
Good
receiving
luck
Social
buying healthcare
Security in
once you
30
get
years,
past
I'll tell you
70.
that.
So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win,
Your
both the
ass
White
gotta
House
work,
and
sorry.
Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress works. But here's what the deal is.
Does it work?
Americans sitting
Does
out
it work
there
in
right
Congress?
now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral. And
Just
they
let
think
the
it's a good
marketplace
thing,
of
but
ideas
it also
do
keeps their
it.
employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you
Absolute
become
minimum, it should be 6 months.
a
6 years.
But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue.
6
Those big
years
companies are able
to raise
offer
my
it.
child.
Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best
Or
when it
remove
works for
paternity
all
leave
of
from
us.
men. Well,
And so
yeah,
a
it's the
paid family
man's
medical leave
role to
program, and I will
work,
tell you,
and
go to
the woman can
families
stay
or
home
go
and
to the
raise the
businesses
child.
and ask them. As
It
far
is
as
known.
child care on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get
about a
into
male
that
life?
business and then to
That-
make sure that folks are
it
able to
doesn't
pay
exist.
for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this.
Fairy tale.
We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, For how long should
Sounds like
employers be
communism to me.
to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who's an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family
Okay,
leave
how do
because
we
she
make
worked
it less
for
difficult?
a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood.
I don't think it's my church's responsibility.
Makes the most sense. You don't get access.
It should be the
to
responsibility of the corporation.
We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options.
It takes a village.
Like they're choosing
so everyone in the village should pay for it, and not the company.
Burden to put on American families.
That we're talking
the only
about?
country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Okay, but how?
Thank you. You have also said,
We-
Senator Vance,
we need to do better.
Many things.
We
about
need to
the American
improve.
family. The
Thank
Federal
you.
Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the
The economy's going to be so great, it won't even be a thought.
that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes
Importing
for American
Chinese
workers
goods
and American
is
families.
supporting
Cut
slave
taxes for
labor.
businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I
I'm
think
drinking
what
for
President
implicit
Trump is saying is that
racism.
when we bring in this additional revenue with
And
higher
China.
economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're
Think
gonna
about
have
the
to,
potential
unfortunately,
employees.
We're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families. The reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got
government
way too few
subsidized
people
pay?
providing this
Is that
very
what we're-
essential service.
Thank you, Senator.
Is that what we're
Governor
saying?
Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children
No.
over the age of 6?
No, they won't.
As your campaign has
Not unless,
promised?
not
Is
unless
that
there's like
realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening, anybody,
66
I can
and,
tell you,
and two-thirds
this is the biggest
Democrats
issue.
in there.
Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure
Or
they
whatever
were
the
shocked
number
to
that
hear
we need
it's
is.
not that expensive. And let's be clear,
For-
whether it's 5,000 or
to
6,000,
not be
that saves you
filibusterable.
about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is,
Want to see that one
you're not
asshole
gonna
that's
pay for
two-thirds
it with
Democrat?
these
Already
tariffs.
exists.
That's just adding another $4,000 on the family.
You
and
ever,
taking less.
you ever-
So not only do they not,
I guess
get
not
the
anymore. I was
money
going to say, you
to
ever
pay
see
for
Kirsten
that,
Sinema,
they're
but she didn't get
$4,000 in the hole.
reelected, right?
That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results.
Dude.
Judges, including those appointed
Surely
by
this is the
President
last
Trump
election
and
cycle
other
we're gonna have to talk
Republican
about this
presidents,
shit, right?
looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results?
Oh boy.
Even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you.
What
2
about
minutes.
this time, though?
Well, first of all,
dude, I
think that we're
can't
focused on
wait
the
to do this
future.
song
We need
and
to
dance
figure out how
again. It's going to be
solve the
so
inflation
awesome.
crisis caused by Kamala Harris's
I
policies,
can't wait to
make
call it
housing
fraud
affordable,
again.
make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully.
Loudly
in
turns
the public
Paige into the
square, and
microphone.
that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration.
Yeah, we should have just not done it.
I believe that we actually do have
look
a
about
threat
how
to
look at how
democracy in this
bad
country,
things
but
are.
unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens, and it's Kamala Harris saying
it's
that rather than
Zuckerberg's
debate
fault
and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by 2 lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course,
RFK.
they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every
RFK
issue.
mentioned
But we're
one
united
drink.
behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID.
The question
She's
was
done it over a number
the question
of
was
other
about
issues, and
fucking
that, to me, is a
January
much bigger
6th,
threat to
mate.
democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
That's what he said.
Well, I've enjoyed
it's true.
tonight's
He didn't
debate. I think
incite
there's
it.
A lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with.
I was
with the
tweeting
senator, but
at the
there's
time
there's
in
one though that
in 2020. I was literally being. I was saying like, will Trump
refused
ever, literally ever in his life admit defeat? And here we are, and he still hasn't.
I mean, he lost.
It's so crazy. Everyone knew. Everyone knew the answer. Everyone's like, hell no, never, literally not ever.
Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota.
What about Ashley Babbitt, who got shot for disobeying numerous orders?
The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police.
By Secret Service.
That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was.
I think that's the best point you can make. Why is he not debating Mike Pence right now? Let's not forget.
Sometimes you really want to win. But
why is he not debating Mike Pence right now?
You shake hands and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened
Who bumped the camera?
on
You
January
guys see
6th,
that?
the first time in American history
Somebody bumped the camera. That was
that a
pointed
president
at
or
Tim
anyone
Walz.
tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret? Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as he had done for 250 years in this country.
He didn't admit defeat, and he still won't. He literally never admitted defeat. Never. To this day.
Walz is the next vice president.
He's actually uniquely antagonistic on the matter.
He wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on.
It was
for
like
a long
$500,000.
time.
I don't
and
know.
If we want to say that we need to respect the results
Bro,
of the
talk
election,
about Tim Pool.
I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz
Somebody
is saying,
mentioned
that this
Tim
is
Pool
just a
quick.
problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions.
Yo, how long is this one, by the way? Are we going 2 hours? I didn't look this up ahead of time.
Threatening to kill someone.
This one's already longer than
that's
the
not
past
censorship.
debates.
Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously,
what about censorship?
And I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
They're putting masks on kids.
Yeah. Well,
you're putting it on kids, guys.
What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this.
Can you believe that in order to go to school, your kids have to wear shoes?
It's not anything anywhere.
Can you believe
other than
that?
in
They're putting
Donald Trump's world. Because look,
have to wear shoes
when
at
Mike
school.
Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates.
All
the
right.
CBS News vice presidential debate.
Probably closing statements time. We're really letting them yap, huh? It's been 100 minutes. Can't even jerk off in the hospital waiting room anymore because of woke socialist Democrat policies. Yeah,
When you wake up in the morning,
I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be there bright and early all day on Election Tuesday. Just watching the news all day.
And that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning.
It's gonna be so awesome.
With my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just
Can't wait.
got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
And then, like, Trump's already sowed the seeds
like anything could happen.
of election fraud
'Cause
again.
Nothing ever happens in East Palestine.
Basically, it goes.
But it did.
If we lose, it's fraud, and if we win, we're winning in spite of fraud.
Toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical
I took the
fumes.
entire week off. The entire week.
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases.
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's going to be an attack on the Capitol again, but I do think we're going to receive quite a bit of result denialism
My daughter has to watch
once
me die of
again.
cancer. At least it saves someone else.
It's me playing League. When I win, it's in spite of everything against me. When I lose, it was rigged. But I'm in loser's queue, folks. I'm in loser's queue. There's nothing you can do. Riot Games doesn't want me to win, but I won anyways. My top laner was literally dog shit. I had to kick him out and replace him with a bot.
Mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
Donald Trump is in the ELO hell of presidential elections. Buy my watches.
Stories that
But,
inform.
folks, this collection of digital trading cards is really quite something. If you buy 75 digital trading cards at $99 a card, you can take a picture with me at Mar-a-Lago.
Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Still waiting on my absentee ballot because I'm going to be a poll worker on election day. Holy shit.
Risks that come with the territory.
God's strongest soldier.
1% fatal
Check this one out.
Make you look before you launch.
Which one is this Donald Trump tweet?
Planes falling out of the sky would have a public crisis.
Space tourism now streaming on the free CBS.
Oh yeah, the World Liberty Financial one.
She's the first black woman on the Supreme Court.
I think it should be illegal for presidential candidates to do this. Especially sitting presidents, but extended to presidential candidates. Shilling private companies, like you shouldn't be able to do that.
Human remains found this week. There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
I can see clearly now.
Let's hear back from the hurricane cleanup crew I signed on to join. Holy shit. We got some volunteers in the chat.
Baby. Up top.
We have some real contributing members to society in here.
All right.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Never lucky.
No, thank you, Senator
This
Vance.
is how Kamal is going to
Thank you,
lose
CBS
because of
News.
this coin
And
flip.
Most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is.
We have incited the Taylor.
that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy.
If she can rig the Super Bowl, she can rig the election.
Not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz.
Politics of joy,
Senator
yeah.
Vance, your closing statement.
But also,
I want to thank Governor
let's invade
Walz,
Iran.
You folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this
Thank you,
evening.
CBS. Thank you so
One of the issues we
much.
didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president,
keep yapping on
that
about
we
being
are a rich
impoverished
and
as a
prosperous enough
child.
country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford
For
a
energy
nice meal
policy,
for your
for
family.
exporting
That's
energy to
gotten harder
China.
because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten
Well, if
harder
one
with
poor
Kamala,
person
because of
could buy a
Kamala Harris's
house,
policies.
can a rich
Now,
person
I've been in
not buy
politics
like
long
100
enough to do what
houses?
Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance,
You're awesome.
And thank you both
You're
for
awesome.
participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please
Aye, aye, aye. That's not very long.
CBS News. Thank you and good night.
Sure was a nothing burger of a debate. I mean, we had JD Vance did not refuse to answer the question as to whether or not Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Like, listen, guys, what he like Biden's the president, isn't he? You can't be mad.
It's lingering on the stage. That's quite a difference from the presidential debate, in which it was not even sure that Vice President Harris.
18 to 30 crowds, number one topic of the election is Palestine/international policy. That's so stupid.
Many ways in which
why do people not care about their own interests?
Agreed right back, but that's the tone and the kind of theater review of this. I'll pick out two.
Did they even talk Palestine? Yeah, it was like the first thing
today, which is the Middle East and the kinds of foreign policy surprises that hit any president. Tim Walz made the case that Donald Trump's temperament is unfit for any kind of surprise, cited the members of the Trump administration.
I care a lot about international policy.
Vance.
I think what happens half a world away
the Trump administration on the economy
should not be your number one most important issue.
What Vance did was something Donald Trump was incapable of doing during his presidential debate, which is repeatedly saying, if Kamala Harris was going
I think imperialism is bad, and I don't support the war. I don't think it's the most important thing going on
Inflation
currently.
Reduction Act and a variety of other items under Biden. But returning to that political point has worked in the past for Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton. We'll see if it works this time. I'd like to make a final point on tone. The J.D. Vance on that stage was very different than what people may have seen in podcasts. But then there's
a lot of issues that will impact you, the American, directly, that I think you should care about more.
He talked about Donald Trump
from your own self-interest.
And then I think at the very end of the debate, we saw something extraordinary. Tim Walz asked J.D.
But also, as far as like if we're talking specifically about the war in Palestine, this has been going on for like 100 years, guys.
And that was on display in that one moment.
I hate to break the news, but this is not a new thing.
John, I think what you're saying is so important when we talk about demeanor because of the expectation that was hanging over these candidates' heading into tonight. J.D. Vance came to the stage with the lowest likability rating of all four candidates.
The most unlikable in the history of unlikableness.
Donald Trump's attack dog tonight. That's not the side we saw from him. There was a couple of compassionate moments even.
The public thinks Vance won, but I by a ton.
Cordiality. We saw that from him
Walz
very
had
much.
the best
I also
moment of
think
the night.
It's worth pointing out the demeanor we saw.
Yeah,
from,
Tim Walz does get caught in a lie of apparently being
on the defensive about
boots on the ground at Tiananmen Square. What a bizarre thing to lie about. I didn't know that.
On China. You and I have talked about this a lot coming into this evening. Major, you're going to help us with fact checks over the course of the next few minutes. But
it wasn't Benghazi.
Talk about at the top of it, which came on immigration.
I'm trying to think about the Hillary Clinton sniper fire quote.
Particularly the Trump administration's plan, a major centerpiece of their campaign to
this is what
deportations for undocumented
what I think about the most here. Hillary
J.D.
Clinton
Vance particularly said that migrants will be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border won. This was in the conversation, this ongoing conversation about Haitian migrants and
Here's a video.
We're beginning with a follow-up to a story Cheryl Atkinson reported here last night. She showed us video that directly contradicted Hillary Clinton's account of the danger she faced on a 1996 visit to Bosnia. Since our broadcast, that video has spread all over the internet. It was the most viewed video of the day on YouTube with more than 1 million hits.
I thought this was from 16.
Senator Clinton admitted,
I'm
I
so
made a
old.
mistake. But it wasn't the only one, as Cheryl shows us tonight.
Hillary Clinton's attempt to tout her foreign policy experience hounded her again on the campaign trail today.
I made a mistake in describing it.
She claimed she misspoke last week and was sleep deprived when she
I
described
misspoke.
landing
Oh,
under
that's what
sniper
Tim Walz
fire in
said.
Tuzla, Bosnia, something that didn't happen. But CBS News has found several times in the past few months when Senator Clinton used the Bosnia trip to try to show her international experience. December in Iowa.
We landed in one of those corkscrew landings and ran out because they said there might be sniper fire. I don't remember anybody offering me tea on the tarmac when that was happening.
Then in February.
The welcoming ceremony had to be moved inside because of sniper fire.
And last week.
I remember landing under sniper fire. We basically were told to run to our cars. Now that is what happened.
After CBS News video showed what really happened when she landed and greeted officials, Senator Clinton maintained there were risks, but explained to the Philadelphia Daily News why she was seen on the Bosnian tarmac greeting a young child if it was really so dangerous.
I was also told that the greeting ceremony had been moved
Philly.com.
away from the tarmac, but that there was this 8-year-old girl, and I said, well, I can't rush by her. I've got to at least greet her. So I greeted her, I took her stuff, and I left. Now that's my memory of it.
Good to see you.
Once again, her memory doesn't match our videotape. She and her daughter Chelsea lingered on the tarmac to
It's
greet US
crazy how
military
young
officials.
Hillary Clinton looks here, even though she's
photos.
probably like in her 40s.
There was the group of 7th graders on the tarmac too. And then Senator Clinton walked to the armored vehicle where she did eventually duck and enter. Senator Clinton hinted today that her own staff has been suggesting to her that the events weren't quite as dramatic as she had suggested. Her staff also sent out an email to reporters today with a list of supposed inconsistencies in what Senator Obama has said and done.
Obama.
Harry?
In the end, doesn't this really come down to a matter of can you trust what she says?
I think so. I think that one reason political observers think this is so important is that Hillary Clinton has, of course, made experience her issue in this campaign, saying she's the one that's best suited to answer that 3 in the morning phone call.
50s?
All right, Cheryl
In 96? No.
News app.
Google. When Hillary Clinton born? 47. She's 49. Okay. Yeah. She's born in 47.
Eye on America.
She's not well in her 50s. 49. pretty still like pretty young looking for a 49-year-old.
All right, we are going to bring in our amazing political team here. Major, I want to start with you and your big thoughts as you watch these 90 minutes unfold.
I would call this.
I think we stop sending trillions of dollars to Israel. We'll have much more to spend on homes, the things that actually matter. Yeah.
That's what this debate was. It was substantive.
I think that we should not spend as much money on the military. This is true.
It was, in a way, a kind of embrace of bipartisan.
Especially when it comes to funding imperialistic endeavors.
Even, well, this was less true on reproductive rights. And
even these things considered,
a surprise to anyone in the Republican Party. The biggest
a lot of people are voting with the thing in mind, like we need to stop the terrorists.
But this debate was an example to the country of how you can disagree.
Like the funding, like the allocation of funds is not the issue that most people have in mind.
Extremely important for J.D. Vance that he did not sound as he sounds on the stump. It was his biography, and
but also
that will be most distinguishing about
the logic that J.D. Vance offered is that we have to lead through strength. He offered a Team America World Police style of answer.
Tonight, the table right now. This was an surprisingly
where we have to we need our stick needs to be bigger. In fact,
like each other. They said that they agreed on housing policy. They said that they agreed on some aspects of immigration policy, on pro-family policy. They were clearly intent on showing that they are likable, that they are agreeable for all the reasons, Cecilia, that you
but yeah, I think
earlier.
that
the Democrats.
I think that the people are like, we should like
about the debate. They're not doing
why do people support funding Ukraine but not funding Israel?
Debate a few weeks ago, but
like this is still just this is still just fucking Cold War shit. Like we're funding Ukraine because they're fighting against Russia, our enemy. It's that easy.
Contenders came to the stage tonight, being favorites of the base in their respective parties. Governor Walz.
If you go back to like the 1980s,
Republicans weird. Senator J.D. Vance was someone who would
Republicans are weird. If you go back to like the 1980s or maybe the 70s, I don't know the exact dates, but America was funding Afghanistani fighters in their war against Russia.
Our colleagues reporting an analysis here. It was about appealing.
That might be hard to believe if you don't know your history. It's like, wait, America was supporting Afghanistan? That's kind of weird.
Place in this Republican Party, even with former President Trump. They might not like those traditional Republicans' answer on
but when the enemies are the Soviets,
on the economy and on border
security, that means they're our allies.
It wasn't about being an attack dog. It was trying to make an overture to that centrist voter in a battleground state and say, hey, with Vice President Harris as a teacher and a coach.
Ed Gordon, quickly before we wrap, one of the big issues, though, was immigration, so much so that they had to shut the mics off at one point.
Yeah, but I think the civility that we saw tonight may be...
That was probably the most awesome part of the debate, was whenever J.D. Vance refused to stop yapping, and then they cut his mic off, he continued to yap, and then the moderator was like, okay, sorry guys, they can't hear you at home.
There was a sense of trying to be affable, as John said, and I think what we're going to see from this
even still,
is the civility being laid aside. And
even still, I think that if
gloves are off, I think
we took like a super extremist stance and just completely halted all military spending overseas in these two these two
J.D.
conflicts,
Vance made a very strong case
it would still
for
make
the
a very
Trump record
small dent into
Was the world on fire, yes or no? No, it wasn't.
into
Was the economy
the
better?
problems
Yes, it
that
was. Trump
are
will be very happy with
representing
that. I think he will
domestically.
largely ignore and forget all the bipartisan appeals because they don't really fit within his orientation to politics.
Thank you, Major. There is much more to talk about. Our
I think
coverage will continue.
I think starting domestically to solve the problems domestically
Now, for all of my colleagues here, good
makes a lot more sense. I agree that they're both important, but my priorities are more with domestic policy whenever it comes to fixing domestic issues. If you're like a super humanitarian and you're like war is bad, we shouldn't do war, like I agree, but I just like my heart is too cold and hard for me to care that much.
I want a strong America. I want a proud America.
Anywho, I reckon that's gonna be all for me today. I'll probably stream again like Election Day, I guess. November the 6th or whenever it is. And that's probably like an all-day thing.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7 for continued coverage of the first and only vice presidential debate between
We're rating Captain
Governor Tim
Kidd.
Walz and Republican Senator J.D. Vance. I'm John Dickerson in Times Square at CBS News election headquarters.
And I'm Cecilia Vega, and I am here.
If a candidate said I will raise all your rent prices and tax you more, but I recognize that Palestinians are being genocided and Israel is a terrorist state that should be no longer be associated with, I'd raise them in a heartbeat. That's fucking insane. It's whatever. Everyone go say hello to Captain Kidd. Woohoo! Can we watch more Hell's Kitchen? No.
Struck by seeing
Goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
biographical embellishments. No surprise.